Hi, I'm Lee, and I'm a puppet, and I'm here to answer your questions about the publishing industry. While we're broadcasting, you can ask questions via the Q&A thing, and I'm joined by Annalie and Simbina, whose name I think I just mispronounced. All right. So, the first question that we have is from Scott James, uh, who wants to know what in your life prompted you to be an advocate of diversity on social media and in your writing, besides having a brain, that is. Okay, first of all, I have to say that that's very human-centered as a question because I do not actually have a brain. I have a hand in my head. And I have to say that having a brain is not a prerequisite for wanting to be a decent person. You know, it's just common sense. Like, if we focus everything on the meat-centric, you know, and if we just go around and we worry all the time about what the fleshies think. Sorry, my bad. That's a derogatory term. People of flesh who are human, if we worry only about them, then we completely ignore the rest of everybody else. And you know, there are a lot of people on the planet who are not necessarily human, like me. But I'm still a person. And people are what's important, okay? So, what in my life prompted me to be an advocate? Living. Right. All right. That is the only question we have. Lee, do you, please, you have a question?
I have a question for you, Lee. Where do you get your ideas?
Where do I get my ideas? Out my ass. No, really. I mean, you know, there's a hand there, and I just kind of, you know, the ideas go there, and then they're on the keyboard, and out my ass. I hope no one was expecting this to be for, you know, kids.
So
Because that's, you know, yeah. Follow up.
follow-up question, actually completely unrelated question. So if you are writing a story and you get feedback from different people and it's all about the same thing in the story, but their feedback is all different, what do you do with that?
Well, so I think that there's a couple of different ways you can respond to feedback. I break it down into roughly 4 types. Number 1, that is, oh! And what that basically means is, really, I should have seen that. Thank you for catching it. That's if I agree with the person. Then feedback number 2 is, I see what you're talking about, but you've identified the wrong problem. And this is when they've said something like, you know, I'm fascinated by the airship captain. I'm borrowing this example from a friend of mine, my valet, who's down there. I'm fascinated by the airship captain. And I want to know why he has this scar on his face, and why is he so cranky? And you're like, actually, he's just there to get them from point A to point B. The problem is not that I need to give you more information about the airship captain, it's that he's too interesting. So, you've identified a problem, not the right problem. Then, number 3 is nope. Just nope. And that's when someone has given you advice or made a request or a suggestion, and you're just like, nope. You want me to tell a different story? Not doing it. Nope. 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 And then the last one, is, what the fuck? And this is when someone has given you a reaction that has seemingly nothing to do with your story. For instance, I had someone say, it looks like this line right here makes me think that this is two different characters and it's supposed to be one person. And you're like, actually, it is two different characters. What the fuck? Now, with that particular one, I usually ask the person something that is relatively less, shall we say, aggressive than what the fuck. And there, it's usually in order to find out why they had that reaction, because I figure that I've done something terribly, terribly wrong with the manuscript to cause them to have such a completely bizarre reaction. So I try to say something like, can you tell me why you thought it should only be one person? And usually when they expand on it, it turns out that it falls into one of the other categories. So that's how I handle it.
Thank you.
Oh, look, we have a question from Paul Weimer. He says, how do you balance the rabbit hole of endless research on world building and actually sitting down to actually write? Good question. First of all, I don't sit down to write. I use a standing desk, in part because I have no legs. Second, when you use world building as an excuse to actually, stop writing, that's a lot of what's going on. Part of what's happening is that you don't know the story well enough. You still are trying to make decisions, but you're thinking about world building rather than the story. Does that make sense? So you're using it kind of as a soporific to disguise the fact that you have no idea what's happening. Now, sometimes you actually need to do that research in order to be able to tell the story that you want to. That's good. But you also sometimes use it for procrastination. The thing is, if you know the story you want to tell, and if you're excited about it, then you'll start telling it. So, one of the ways I handle the rabbit hole is that I try to confine my research to the things I actually need to tell the story. Which means not things like, exactly what fashion someone is wearing in 1907. That's something I can come back to. It doesn't help me tell the story. It helps me make the world more real. But that's a detail. So I focus on big picture things, and then I start writing the story, and only after I've started, and sometimes only after I've stopped, do I go back and research the details. So that's how I do it. And I should say that this does involve doing research and writing at the same time. You can do both. All right. And there's no more questions. Emily, do you have another question for me?
Let me see. So this is something I ran into recently. Have you ever had an experience where you're going back and looking at your drafts and you find a story that you started and it seems pretty good, but then you never finished it and you have no memory of where you're going with it? And if so, where do you go with it?
Yes, I have. Okay. So, first thing to know is that if you don't remember where the story was going, that means that you probably weren't that excited about it. I mean, you might have been at the time, but you're not that excited about it anymore. So it's okay that you don't remember the ending, because clearly it's not an ending that excited you. Second, that means that the promises you've set up at the beginning are not sufficiently clear. But that just means you have an open page. So what I do is I start brainstorming, and I ask two significant questions. First one is, why? Why did the events that have already been written down take place? Why did I get here? What happened before the story started? Why? Then the next thing that I ask is, what effect? So I can see where the story is going. What's the effect? If things just go forward from here, what's the effect on the world and on the character? And I just brainstorm a list of those. So I've got that list. I've got this kind of what effect. And then the other thing that I try to ask is, what does the main character want? And a lot of times, that's the piece that I've forgotten. And as we say in theater, what's my motivation? It's really important to know. Because if you don't know the character's motivation, then you can't figure out what they're going to do. Like, what's a good plan? I don't know. There's a lot of good plans. But it depends on what you want to achieve. So you have to figure out kind of what the world is that your character was living in, the effects that from the things that are already on the page, what your character wants to achieve, and then you can come up with an ending. Sometimes it involves like throwing out stuff that you've already written. That's okay. That's totally fine. You might use them for something else. You can also look for ideas in my ass. Or yours. Yours is probably better.
I don't know. I think never mind. There's no good way that was going to go.
No.
No.
I can make these jokes. Sorry. It's a puppet thing. You wouldn't understand. All right. Oh, Paul has another one. Okay. Editing. Besides simple things like editing, spelling, and the like, when do you sit down to editing the manuscript for a short story? Do you edit it in progress? No. At a particular break point? After a draft is done? All right. So, editing for me comes in a couple of different forms. There's structural editing and polish editing. Structural editing are things like plot and motivation. Line editing is things like, wow, you've used the same word 3 times in this sentence. Oh yeah, done that. I don't worry about that till the end. Because if I'm not going to use the words, why polish them, right? So, first thing I do is I try to keep writing the story even when I know that there's something big and structural that I want to go back and change. I'll make a note about it, but I don't always go back to change it. I'll just keep writing as if I have. The reason I do that is that I don't want to lose momentum. Momentum is sometimes really important, especially when you're feeling the character's emotions. And it does depend on the kind of writer you are. But generally speaking, I wait until I get to the end to do any sort of big edits. Not always, but usually. So I go through and I mark down the, how do you say, the kind of structural ideas, the plot points I need to address, pacing issues, sort of looking at my own personal reader reactions. So I mark down my plan for changing that, but I don't actually make the changes immediately. I just make notes. And the reason for that is that if I start making changes too soon, I might wind up with a cascading effect where something that I thought was a simple change actually winds up having really bad consequences for the rest of the story. Oh, that would be me just losing a rod. Okay, I'm one-handed now. That's fine. That's just going to hang there. Yep. All right. Fortunately, that I can fix later. I'll edit it in post. But this is a good example. Like, I see that there's a problem. If I stop now to fix that problem, It's going to involve me having to go off stage. You might see this terrifying pink hand come up. It'll be messy. There'll be consequences. Or I can wait, keep going as if I'm going to fix it later, and then later, knowing that really you can't tell that that arm doesn't have a rod on it. I mean, yeah, if I wave it around, you can see, but otherwise you don't know. Your reader doesn't know. Your reader will never see this draft. So what you do is you wait until the end so you know what all the consequences are, make the changes, and then, and only then, do you go back and do all of your fine-tuning, your line edits. It would be like me trying to fluff the fur on my arm. And, you know, really, honestly, it doesn't matter what my hand looks like on my right arm because you can't see it anyway. And I'm not going to use it for the rest of this little podcast, webcast thingy, whatever this is. All right. I think we have time for one more question before I lose all feeling in my fingers, which is my brain. Anybody?
I can do one, unless somebody else has one.
Well, how do you deal with the thinking everything you've written is garbage?
Oh, yeah. That's rough. And pretty common. So the first thing to know is that this is a pretty normal reaction. There's a couple of things that are going on here. One of them is that often your taste has outstripped your skill level. So unfortunately, and this is the thing that's kind of tricky, it's hard to tell what's going on in your head. Sometimes what's happening is that actually what you've written isn't very good. But this is only true if you can look at it and identify what is wrong. Like if you look at your manuscript and go, oh, nice one, Lee. You use the same word 3 times in this sentence. That's crap. That is, in fact, crap writing. But I can also identify the problem and therefore fix it. So if you can identify the problem, then that is your brain doing its job. If you cannot identify the problem, and you just have a nagging sense of, I'm a terrible writer, what's actually going on is that you don't know if the story is going to work. You're just basically afraid of it. And the only way to get over that one is to hand it to someone, let them read it, and then you can tell whether or not the story works. And it's scary. I'm not going to pretend that it's not. It's really terrifying. But it's actually the only way to tell. It's like, the example I use a lot is that in some ways, writing is like drugs. Okay, so what you're trying to do is you are trying to hack someone else's brain to produce a specific emotional reaction, right? And the manuscript is your drug. Now, drug companies do clinical trials, right? They hand it to people, and they're like, take this drug. Interesting. Oh, that was not really what we expected to have happen. And then they change the drug. Or sometimes they're like, whoa, hot diggity, that's doing exactly what we want. And sometimes you have things like, well, we really wanted that to help you with your heart, but nice hard on. Great, we'll use it for something else. It's all fine as long as you know what's happening. And the only way you can do that is to hand it to a reader. And that's scary because you don't know if you're going to give them relief from a heart condition or a hard-on. Boy, that was maybe not the most helpful analogy. But you understand my point. You have to hand it out. You have to. There's no way you can get past the fear of what if it doesn't work unless you hand it to someone and see if it does. And the beautiful thing is that if it doesn't work, you can fix it. It's not the end of the world. You're not actually going to kill anyone with your fiction. Probably. I mean, unless, you know, you're like a necromancer or something. Okay, but hopefully that answered your question. See, Sally would like to know if I find any prejudice against puppets from the publishing industry. Yes! Oh my God! Could you people stop using sock puppet? Ugh! It's like, you know, I have some very good friends who are sock puppets. Do you understand how hurtful it is for them? For you all to be just using that term willy-nilly as if all sock puppets are just racist bigots and have no thoughts in their head. It is really, really frustrating. Think before you use derogatory terms, people. Besides, I have some really good friends who are fleshies. Nice folks. Did you have something, Annalie?
I have a follow-up question if you have time before brain freeze sets in.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so there are obviously a lot of stereotypes about various types of puppets. When somebody is trying to write about puppets, how do you suggest that they approach writing about puppets or about anyone else that they maybe don't know a whole lot about so that they portray puppets respectfully and realistically?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Okay, so first of all, if you don't have any friends who are puppets, you really need to question your life. And if you're someone who's afraid of puppets, you know, should you really be the person who's writing about them? Because you're giving them only one very singular dimension. And we get a lot of bad rap in Hollywood. I mean, yeah, we got the Muppets, we got Sesame Street, but you start trying to look for anything for adults, and you got what? Chucky? Tell me the last time you saw a respectful representation of a puppet as an adult. No. You can't, can you? So one of the things that happens is that people will then cast the puppets in one of two roles, either the non-threatening one. Do you know how many roles that I have had to do in my life in which I have to talk like this? Oh, hi there. Hi, boys and girls. Fuck me. I mean, seriously. God. Or the other role that puppets are given, I'm coming for you. You know, we have inner lives too. So, thing one, if you don't have any friends who are puppets, seriously question whether or not you are the person to be telling that story. Thing two, do your homework. And this is not just, well, I got a friend who's a puppet. No, it's not just one friend. It's like asking me to represent all puppetry. I know what it's like to have. I got rods, sticks coming off my arm, actually, because the other one dropped to the floor. But point being, not every puppet has the same life experience. Same thing with any other group. Not every person has the same experience as other people in that group. So you need to get as wide a range of opinions and experience as you can. The next thing is try to read things and watch things that are written by the group that you're writing about for the group that you're writing about. Because trust me, the things that puppets talk about amongst ourselves are not things that we talk about with you guys. I mean, you know, do you want to really hear my nightmares about five-fingered monsters crawling up my ass? No, you don't. But you do if you're writing it. And it's not the kind of thing that I'm normally going to have a conversation about with a fleshy because it makes them uncomfortable to hear that they center, that one of their appendages centers in my nightmares. But if you're going to try to write from my perspective, you darn well better know that that centers in my nightmares, which means reading things written by puppets for puppets. And the next thing is that you want to make sure that you're reading contemporary accounts and not just historical accounts. You can't rely on common wisdom, because most of the time common wisdom has been influenced by media representations. And remember what I've said? I love children. I love them. So, basically, you need to broaden your horizons, read way outside your comfort zone. And if you're looking at something and you're afraid that you're going to get in trouble because you'll get something wrong, and you don't know what it is that you're going to get wrong, if you cannot list a list of things that you can get wrong, that means that you probably don't really know enough about the group. Like not knowing that I find sock puppet an offensive term. You know? If you don't know that, if you don't know the things that the group finds offensive, don't write it. Find out. Tumblr, actually, great source. Great source. Don't participate in the conversation. Just read them. Read people complaining about their representation and all the things that people get wrong. All right. Coming for you. Ah. That'll get you started. And now I cannot actually feel the entirety of my brain. So I'm gonna thank you, and hopefully we'll do this again. Good night.
Thanks, Lee.
Sure thing. Oh, I'm naked.
I think I just saw your guts.
Ah.